Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Sober Yoga Girl podcast. I am so excited to be sitting with Rachel Hechtman today. And Rachel is, I've been following Rachel on Instagram for I don't even know how long and watching her journey in New York, living in New York. And she is sober in Central Park on Instagram. And she's a sober community leader in New York. And I just love watching your journey and seeing all of the different work that you're doing over there. And I'm really excited to sit down and hear your story today. So welcome. How are you?
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, no, it's crazy to be part of this amazing community and get to talk to people like you and get to meet all these interesting people through social media. Like you're in
Yeah,
Bali right now and I'm in
that's
New
so
York
cool.
and we're
That's so cool.
right. And we're like, I feel like I'm living my dream, you're living your dream, and we get to have these sober journeys and then we get to talk about it.
It's amazing and pretty unbelievable when you think about my life pre-sobriety. I don't think I could ever imagine just being on Zoom calls with strangers. And now I love it. I love it.
Same. Pre-sobriety, I mean, I couldn't even do things alone. Like I was so codependent. Thinking back to that person and how far I've come, it's really mind-blowing. And I have to take a minute every day to kind of appreciate the journey instead of just constantly trying to push
Yeah.
forward, you know?
Yeah. It's amazing. And so did you grow up in New York originally? Is that where you're from?
So everyone asks me that. And okay, if you are a born and raised New Yorker, I cannot say yes. I have to say no because I was not born here and I didn't start really living in the city until I was about 15 when my dad moved here and I would come on the weekends to skateboarding school and all the rigid rules. But we moved around a lot when I was little.
Okay.
I was born in Boston and then we lived in New Jersey for a few years and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Connecticut. My dad's a doctor, so we're constantly on the move. And I think that even that led up to some of the things that happened later on because there wasn't like a constant in my life. Like I was always the new kid. I was always getting like a new room, new friends, trying to find that thing that grounded me. So, I think about that a lot, actually. Like, what if we had just stayed in one place? Would my life had looked the same? But I really identify with being a New Yorker because it's been 20 years of me basically like calling New York home.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm going to say I'm a New Yorker.
And I have to say I can relate to that on some levels. Not that I moved around a lot because I lived in the same house. I grew up in the city of Toronto, but just relate to in terms of for me, I lived in the Middle East for a long time. I lived in the Middle East for 6 years, and it was where I got sober, and that is what I think of as home. And so when people ask me where I'm from, it's I identify with home as being Abu Dhabi, which seems kind of ridiculous, and people that are from there would be like, that's not your home. But just identifying with a place and what does home mean for you, and it's kind of different for everyone.
Exactly. And I love when the simple questions where you should be able to answer easily, I always have a long-winded response. People are like, what do you do for work? I'm like, do you have 5 minutes?
Yes. I just asked you before we started the show. I was like, so what do you want your title to be? And it was just this long-winded of all these random things. I love it. I love it.
I know I need to work on my elevator pitch a little bit, but I also think that's part of the journey. It's keeps evolving.
Totally.
It's been 6 months of me doing sober in Central Park full time. And I think, when you're trying to figure it out as you're going, things are going to keep changing. And you just kind of have to be open to that flow and that process. And I try to trust the process. I used to be a control freak. So, it's a work in progress every day.
And what did you do before you were doing sober in Central Park full time?
So I always worked in the nonprofit world. I was specifically in nonprofit fundraising, so philanthropy, and really doing big gifts from donors and big events, fundraising events like big galas where we'd raise $2 million. And so I liked that because I did feel like I was making an impact in my community, at least getting money from the rich New Yorkers and giving it to people who needed it. And that was a lot of networking and events and a lot of skills that I was able to take into sober in Central Park. But I'll say I never thought in a million years that Instagram account would become what it's become. It really was just like, I was 8.5 months sober. I had no friends really anymore. I had broken up with my now ex, and I was sitting around being like, how do I hold myself accountable? And like, I need friends.
Yeah.
So that's where Sober in Central Park came. And then I started getting DMs eventually that were like, I found your account a year ago and now I'm 6 months sober. And so as someone who worked in the like nonprofit world, like I was always looking for that direct impact. But when you're in the nonprofit fundraising scene, you're just getting the money. You don't really see that impact.
Yeah.
So when I started getting those DMs, I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like I was always lost. I knew nonprofit philanthropy wasn't like my thing, but I liked it. It was okay. And so I was searching for my purpose. And when I started recovering out loud, that's when I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. And it kind of gave me, it helped also think about all of the past, and it gave a little bit of sense to some of the stuff that happened to me. I mean, I think if that stuff hadn't happened in the past, I wouldn't be so appreciative of the now, and I wouldn't have my story, and I wouldn't have all of these like crazy things to say, but it shaped who I am. And I have to just be, appreciative of that past version of myself. So
totally. So tell me a bit about, we started the call and you told me a little bit about your childhood, like moving around. Tell me a bit about like more about your journey before sobriety. Like what was your childhood, your life like?
It's funny. So I was talking to my mom about this yesterday, and I felt really misunderstood always growing up. I was always like kind of getting into trouble, or the teachers would always be like, she talks too much in class, or she doesn't pay attention, but I had really good grades. I was always like a high achiever, but now look, I had ADHD, but I wasn't diagnosed till I was 14. So looking back on a lot of my behaviors, it makes sense why I acted that way. But as a kid, I didn't know. I felt different than everyone else. And that was kind of a lonely feeling. Like I kind of let myself become that stereotype of I get into trouble in school. I talk like I'm always kind of causing a scene. And that went my whole teenage years. My parents got divorced when I was 14, and I started drinking. I started trying different things to numb, and I started partying, and I just stopped caring at a very young age. And it's scary to think back to. But, my mom sent me to boarding school when I was 15 because I almost failed out of public school. I had an older boyfriend, I had older friends, and I just wanted to party. And that was so young. So I repeated my sophomore year at boarding school, got diagnosed with ADHD, only because one teacher one day thought I forgot to take my meds. She was like, oh, did you skip the med woman this morning? I was like, what meds? And she's like, that explains a lot. And I got diagnosed and got put on medication, and my whole life kind of changed for the good for a while. But no one really sat me down and it kind of explained what having ADHD meant. No one said like you produce less dopamine in your brain naturally than the average person. So anything that you take or that causes that dopamine to release, you can become addicted to. And so I just kind of went through high school and I was okay. And then I got to college, and that's when everything went crazy. I was already doing like lots of party drugs. And I just went all in, and I didn't care if I really lived or died. I just wanted to party, and I wanted to quote unquote have fun. And I ended up leaving college twice, both for mental health reasons. One of the times was really scary. And, I'm still surprised that I made it out of there alive and, who I am today. But it was really touch and go.
Wow.
And it was also like depression, a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, and I got misdiagnosed a few times with different things because of all the different things I was putting into my system. And I would cry every day. And I remember just being so hopeless and so lost. And, I didn't recognize myself in the mirror by the end. Like I would literally look at myself and just cry. And my therapist asked me to start saying affirmations. And it was during COVID, and I would sit there in the mirror and I couldn't do it. And she said, just pretend, just make it up. And even if you don't believe it now, just say 5 nice things to yourself. And I just remember standing there and like, you're strong, like crying. And I laughed because it's sad. But that's when things started changing, when I started saying those affirmations. And that's when I realized this all comes down to how we talk to ourselves and what we say to ourselves and how we feel about who we are. And it took me 5 years of knowing I had a drinking problem to really stop. And I really think it was the fear of dying at the end, right? I got like this pain in my side. And for some reason that pushed me over the edge. I was like, I'm going to die. This pain in my side. And it's crazy because even though alcohol's bad for you that whole time, you're working up to the breaking point. It wasn't until I felt that like pain, that physical pain, that I was like, okay, I really have to stop now or something bad's going to happen. And I was like 100 pounds heavier. I think my body was starting to shut down. Like it wasn't processing any food. It was hard to walk. Everything was just different. I mean, if you would have told me then my life would be what it is now, I don't know. Like I would never have believed you ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the beauty of sobriety, right? You just never know like where your life's going to go after you stop drinking. It just opens up so many doors, and I still don't know. Like the story is still being written, right?
Yeah. So incredible. And how long have you been alcohol free now for?
A little over 2.5 years. I just celebrated that milestone.
Yeah, I think I saw that Instagram post actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I went alone to Jamaica, like by myself for 5 nights.
I love that. Just to celebrate your 2.5 years.
Well, it was also my 34th birthday. So I had kind of burned myself out a little bit because I'm so ADHD. I'm very all or nothing. Like that's why I don't drink anymore. There was never a happy medium. It was always like a million drinks. There was never like a one drink. It was like, let me just drink as much until I fall asleep. I was one of those people that fell asleep when I got really drunk anywhere. Like I would fall asleep at a club, at a bar, in the back of a cab. Not safe. It's called the Rachel pass out. So yeah. But yeah, it's been 2.5 years and I've never felt so strong or confident or the biggest thing is the anxiety. And that there was always like a tightness in my chest for as long as I can remember, where it's like hard to breathe. And it made me like have seriously bad social anxiety. Like everywhere I went, I thought people were looking at me or judging me or listening to me. It was almost like a paranoia. And so when I stopped drinking and that started going away and I was able to go and do things on my own a little bit more, and I wasn't scared of looking stupid or what people were thinking, that was the most freeing part of this whole journey. Like I realized how many things that I hadn't been doing in the past because I was scared of what other people thought. I was like, why do I care what that person thinks? And then of course the all or nothing in me, I had to become the sober girl on Instagram. I went from the party girl, like, let me be the sober girl now and really not care what people think. Right. Like I had to really lean into that, but it was a journey.
I love that. There is so much in your story that I can relate to. Like, it's mind blowing. This idea of, I used to have this too, like being so afraid of doing anything for people judging me or doing anything, saying anything. I would have these like, panic attacks about like the most things that now seem so small. And there was just this layer of like anxiety and that never went away at all times.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's my why. And what I've come to kind of realize, at least for myself, is I was the one judging myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was the one being judgmental of other people as well.
Yeah.
I was the one that was. And so when you're doing that, you think other people are doing that to you.
Yeah.
And
so
that was a weird little mind. I don't know. And once I was able to release that and I was like, okay, even if they think what I'm doing is cringeworthy or cringe or whatever, I don't care. So, but it took me so long to get there. I wish it was like as simple as just don't care what people think.
Yeah. It's a journey for sure. That's so empowering.
It's crazy how just drinking alcohol though can do that to you.
Yeah.
And even things like I had horrendous cramps, like to the point where I would call out of work at least a few days a month. Like I thought I had something wrong. Like I thought it was endometriosis. I was going to specialists when someone told me I had a cyst. I had horrendous stomach issues. Like I thought I was allergic to all these different things.
Wow.
So when I stopped drinking, it was only supposed to be 30 days. It was just going to be dry January. And my mom kind of was like, let's do it together. Come on. Like I'm doing it with you. And after the 30 days, I was like, okay, I'm just going to see how long I can go.
Yeah.
Let's just I'm not going to ruin how good I feel with a drink. And I remember it was like day 45 days in, maybe. My mom's like, why aren't you complaining about your cramps? And I was like, wait, why am I not complaining about my cramps?
Wow. So alcohol was playing a role in having cramps.
So much so, like, I don't even really know anymore. It's like I have a little bit of cramps for a day now, and then it's fine. It was so bad before. I was getting physically ill and like couldn't move. So it really messes with your hormones. And what was crazy to me is none of my doctors ever even suggested that could be something. They never even said, maybe it's all the alcohol you're drinking. Maybe it's your diet. Maybe it's whatever. They just kept sending me to specialists and no one had any answers. And all I had to do was stop drinking.
That is so fascinating to me. And there's so many stories like this of people who have, this thing or that thing and things that would be seemingly so unrelated. Like I'm thinking of my uncle right now. My uncle used to have sleep apnea and like would sleep with a machine and had like a whole bunch of pills he would take. And then he got sober and now his sleep is completely normal. He doesn't take any medication and no doctor ever said to him during that time that it was alcohol. It was just something that, gradually in his sobriety, it corrected itself. And it's just so mind blowing to me.
It is. And I think about that a lot because my dad's a doctor. Okay. He's a pediatric surgeon. And so was my grandfather was a surgeon. And the alcoholism in my family comes from my dad's side. And I'm not saying my dad is an alcoholic at all, but there is that gene from my dad's side. And looking at these two doctors who are amazing in their field and the alcohol that they consume, I think it's a prevalent in the field of medicine. I think a lot of doctors drink, and at least the doctors that I know, not just them, and I think that because of that, they don't think to tell their patients that it's going to be the alcohol because of that weirdness with alcohol. You know how you tell someone you don't drink and the first thing they respond is about their drinking issue. They are drinking. Right. Oh, I don't drink a lot. I can have a few drinks here and there. It's like, I didn't ask you about your drinking. I'm telling you about mine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So I almost think that happens in medicine where the doctors they want to pretend alcohol isn't as bad as it is. Maybe for their own self, or maybe they just don't know how bad it is.
I mean, I definitely think it's probably a bit of both. I was thinking the same thing because I don't think there's that many studies that have really come to the surface. And I know big alcohol is really in control of that message that they want to prevent it getting out there of how harmful it can be. And so I think there's definitely limited awareness around all of those connections.
Exactly. And it's, even if you think about tobacco, right? Like doctors were telling pregnant women to smoke cigarettes back in the 50s. I think they were like, yeah, just have a cigarette. It's fine. And now we know how bad that is.
Yeah.
And, I'm not, I think it was Holly Whitaker in her book, but she says that, alcohol is going to become the new cigarettes.
Oh, and it already is. Do you feel that this movement is happening? I feel like it's happening faster than I ever thought it would. I think COVID kind of kickstarted this thing and now there's like this really cool sober movement happening around the world. And I feel like we're getting to that point.
I totally agree. I think it's special being here in New York because there's so many different kinds of people here and there's so much diversity. And so a lot of stuff like kind of starts here and then spreads out. And, all of these beverage companies that are popping up every day, like the amount of non-alcoholic beverages, like you can see from behind me, like this is my like big stash. That is also just a testament to the demand for these products. And the sober movement, I really think it's happening on Instagram and on TikTok and on social media. I don't think it would have grown so quickly without the sober community on there. And it's making people feel less alone. And it's showing people there is a life without alcohol that's beautiful and fun and fulfilling. And you can find friends and you can do it and you're not alone. I think that's a big piece. People feel alone and they feel ashamed to admit that alcohol is not serving them. And it's, if we can just make it feel a little bit more normal and a little bit more cool to not drink, like that is a huge win to me.
Yeah. I love that. And so tell me about like in your journey. So you said that you were doing dry January and then, you were extending it. What supports did you use during that time? Like, were you part of any communities or listening to any podcasts or books or anything like that?
So it was still lockdown kind of. It was January 2021. And I think if there had been in-person AA meetings, I would have gone and tried to see that avenue, but there weren't in-person meetings. I didn't feel comfortable really doing like a virtual meeting. I also didn't really want to think that I was doing this forever. So the first 30 days, I kind of just white knuckled it. And I read Quit Like a Woman. And I remember drinking so much tea. Like every time I wanted a drink, I would make a cup of tea and I had never been a tea drinker ever. I was like, okay, I need something to get into because I know my ADHD self. I'm like, I bought every flavor I found at the store, every single tea flavor. And every time I wanted a drink, I would go make a cup of tea. By the time the water got hot and I picked the flavor, and I can't drink tea hot. I don't know how people do that. I watch them. I'm like, aren't you burning your mouth? So by the time it cooled down and I drank the cup of tea, I didn't want the drink anymore. And I also, my little sister was supposed to get married during COVID, like before COVID happened. And so she had to move her wedding twice. And the final wedding was going to be October 2021. And I was literally 100 pounds heavier than I am now. And I looked at myself and I was like, I can't go to her wedding looking like this. I just didn't feel comfortable. I felt upset. It made me upset. So I was like, okay, that's my goal. I want to try to get as healthy as I can for her wedding. So the day I stopped drinking, I also started Weight Watchers, WW, because I didn't even know where to start with the eating. And every time I had tried it before, I drank all my points. So I was like, okay, if I don't drink the points this time, maybe it will work. And it did. And I couldn't believe it. And it wasn't just about the weight. It was about feeling good in my skin and like not feeling like crap all the time. Like I was always tired. I always felt like crap. So I started walking with my dog, like as far as we could go. And I didn't know my way around Central Park at all, like zero. Like I knew a few little loops in there, but I would just like drink in the park and leave with my friends. So we would go to the park, we would do the one little loop I knew and turn around. And as I got further into the sober journey, my dog, I call his name's George the Explorer, Curious George. He kept pulling me further into the park, trying to keep exploring.
Wow.
And at first, I didn't want to look like an idiot. Like I didn't know where I was going. I didn't want to get lost. I was scared of the unknown. But then I started like doing one path at a time with him. We started adding on to our little loop. And then it became a 6-mile walk that we did every single morning. Rain, shine, sleet, snow. It was almost unhealthy. Like I convinced myself if I didn't do it, I would relapse. So that's where sober in Central Park came from, because I was literally sober in Central Park, spending all my time there. I became friends with everyone in the park. George started doing off leash. So Central Park lets you take your dogs off leash before 9 a.m. And so it's like this magical little wonderland of like dogs just running freely around Central Park.
It's amazing.
And that became my like meditation every day. It became my way to center myself and be in nature and appreciate the beauty around me. And I would have never, ever done that if I was still drinking. I would have been hungover. I woke up with a hangover every day, And so when I started waking up feeling great, my body almost was expecting the hangover for a really long time. So I'd wake up like, here we go again. Like that was me every day. Like, but then I was like, I feel amazing. I feel great. I started like singing to myself, like, what are we going to do today? And that's when I became like a morning person. I had never, ever been a morning person. And things I tell people at like 100 days, the magic enters your life. Like it starts.
It's so true.
And for me, 100 days, my now ex went out drinking, and he never was a drinker really ever. And he went out and he got drunk on my 100 days. And that pushed me over the edge. I was like, this is a sign from the universe. Like I had already been wanting to break up with him. I was like, we just have to end this. And and I was scared to be alone. That's why we were still together. I didn't want to be alone. And at 100 days, I was like, I'd rather be alone and had temporary discomfort than long-term unhappiness. And it took a while. He moved out a few months later. And then I was really on my own. I had never lived alone before. It was just me and George. And that's where I was like, okay, now I really need this community. I'm alone. And I trust myself, but I know I need support. I can't just keep white knuckling my journey. So that's when I went to Instagram. And I really quickly met Alex. She's sober in Seattle. She reached out to me and she said, hey, I want to form this group of women or people around the world where you can have a meetup. You can find people in your city to have friends. And I was like, wait, is the universe listening to me? Because I need friends. Now I have friends. And
Incredible.
that got me through a lot of it because we were like in a group chat, like a bunch of us. And I remember the first trip I went on was a bachelorette. I was the only sober person. And I spent most of that trip chatting in the group chat. So I realized then the power and the importance of community and people understanding what you're going through and being able to rely on other people. So instant
incredible.
growth, really.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I love that story. And I love that connection to like why your Instagram handle is sober in Central Park. That's amazing. And I can like visualize where you describing that. Cause I visited New York in December and I was like, man, I wish we had met up then. But I was like walking around Central Park with my mom and it was like a full day. Like we walked so much when we were in New York, like the most I've ever walked in my life, probably not 4 days. But I can visualize that and really see how that could be so healing for you. And that's amazing the way that also community has become so pivotal in your journey. And now that's kind of what you're doing now for others.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and I have to really stress though, it was such a like a slow process. It didn't
Right.
happen overnight. Like, and I didn't have the plan, and it wasn't like I had a plan in my head, right? Like, I'm going to stop drinking, and then at 8 months, I'm going to start an Instagram account, and I like it all was just so like it just happened, right? And I remember before I started sober in Central Park, like I had it my personal Instagram account, my just my name,
Right.
and I was always like putting stuff on my stories there from when I was drinking too. It wasn't like I just stopped drinking and was like, I love social media now. Like I loved Snapchat back then. I used to like go on vacation and Snapchat my whole vacation and like, but I was always drunk and like doing dumb stuff. So I felt kind of weird when I got sober, putting all the sober stuff I wanted to post
Right.
on my old Instagram account, because that was where I put all my drunk stuff. And that's where all my old friends watched stuff. And it felt weird. And I wanted to kind of start fresh. That wasn't me anymore. It was this messy middle, as someone I worked with recently said, where I wasn't that old Rachel that was drinking, but I
Right.
wasn't the new Rachel yet. And I kind of felt like, who am I? And when I made Sober in Central Park, I didn't even know if I was going to show my face. I was like, we can just put pictures of the park and my dog. But the third picture, I did a side by side. So I don't know. I changed my mind quickly. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's wild to think about. And I think having that accountability piece for some reason just felt more real putting it on social media. Like I posted about my 100 days, and right after I posted about it, it was my old Instagram, and I put it on Facebook, and I almost threw up after. I was like, why am I telling everybody that I'm 100 days sober? Like, why am I doing that? But right after I posted it, I started getting messages from people who in my orbit that related. And then I didn't even know they were sober. And they were like, or people saying, I thought you were going to die. I'm so happy you're sober. And I'm like, oh, great. Wonderful. But also people saying they had no idea I had a problem.
Right.
Right. It was that big spectrum. And I just thought it was really interesting. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to delete this. Let's just keep going.
Yeah.
But it held me accountable, I will say. Like,
it's amazing. So amazing. And so, okay, before we started recording, I asked you, I was like, okay, what is your title? And you were telling me about all of the amazing things that you do. And I was wondering if you could share with our community, like, what are the things that you do as running sober in Central Park? What does like a day in the life look like, I guess?
Sure. So it's always different, I will say. But a lot of it is I do have to make content every day, but that's actually the thing I think about last. It's really trying to move the sober movement forward from every single sphere I can, whether that is hosting an event with somebody like I had last night. This amazing woman named Stacy. She's a dream and mindset coach, and she came in from Arkansas, and we had this amazing event at Hackett with my dear friend Tawny as well. She has a book that's coming out in a few months.
Tawny, yes. Yeah. She did the same yoga teacher training that I did here in Bali, and our teachers connected us. Anyway, I've had her on the show, so I know who you're talking about. Amazing.
Yeah, I love her. So she's become a really close friend of mine, and so the three of us had this event last night at Hackett, which is the only sober dive bar here in the city. And people came out and we talked about what is your dream? How do you get to your dream? Like, let's make a pathway of writing our dreams out. And so anyways, I do events that are in the city in person to try to have people come and get that community, find that connection without alcohol. I also work with a lot of these non-alcoholic beverage companies that I personally like and love, and help them either get on menus in restaurants, do tastings at the bottle shops here, so people can try these options that really, at least for me, help me feel included in the celebration. And like, I'm not had to just drink water and soda like a kid. And then I'm a coach. So, not in addiction sense, but in terms of the social aspects of what happens when you stop drinking, the relationships that change, going to the party, going on the vacation. What do you say to your friends? What do you say to your family? What happens when someone says something that triggers you? So that's what I've been working on now. And my clients, that brings me joy. That fills up my cup more than anything else in here, is working with people that, I only work with people that I see myself in. So I see a past version of myself in. So I can tell them what worked for me because I think it's going to work for them, right? It's not for everybody, but if we connect, like, and all of my clients are thriving. And when I have these calls with them and I see them glowing and happy, and it's going to make me cry. Like, nothing makes me happier than that. So, I think that I finally have found what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's, sharing my story, being real about the sober life, like, let's just be like authentic and let's be real about what alcohol can do. And let's try to like rise everyone up together. So I'm getting like super whatever, but yeah. So, and it's changing. Like actually I'm going to be on Saturday, I'm going to this cool event in the Hamptons where I'm providing all the non-alcoholic beverages. And it's this LGBTQ youth organization. And I get Andy Cohen's going to be there, I think.
That's
and
so cool.
Yeah, and I'm bringing like Parch and Joyous, which are two companies I really like, and we're gonna serve non-alc to everyone there and just try to make it more normal.
That's so cool.
Like, is that my job? Like I get to go to this really cool event and bring non-alcoholic beverages and talk about them, and like that's my job.
That's so cool. That's amazing.
But it took a long time to get to this point. I think with the Instagram page too, people are like, how did you get to this? And how did you start monetizing? And how did you make it a business? And the key thing is I didn't go into it thinking it was a business. I didn't I started this just to hold myself accountable and make friends. And everything was just a slow, natural progression.
Yeah.
And the business part of it really is leveraging your city. You have to leverage your city and you have to kind of like, you have to do a lot of stuff on the ground and use your Instagram as something that kind of ties everything you're doing together. So I'm trying to work on a course to help people. I would have never thought I would make a course. Like, I still can't believe that I'm saying this, but that's going to help people kind of do what I did in their cities and start working on restaurant menus with non-alc. And how do you do that? And I think if we all do that in our cities, the movement's going to keep pushing out even further.
It's so true. Yeah, that's amazing. And you're so right about it just being a slow burn. And when I look back on my journey, like I'm at 4 years now, and someone said to me recently, they were like, because I had a yoga retreat in Abu Dhabi that had like 16 people sign up. And she was like, where are you finding all these people? And that's what it is. It's like community built over time. It's like I've built these friendships for a long time over Instagram. And so when you're connecting with people and you're just doing it out of a pure place of like heart and joy and like, I'm not trying to get money out of you, then it just naturally turns into, well, of course I'll come on a yoga retreat with you because I want to spend time with you, and that's really important. I think is that you see people diving into business, not understanding that it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's like really this slow thing over time. And one day you'll just be like, wow, I'm like traveling around the world, or doing whatever. Yeah,
exactly. Or writing the book or doing the podcast or, I really believe that there can't be enough voices in this community. We think about like how many bars there are, how many things centered around alcohol there are, how many sober people. There's not that many. So I always say, like, start the sober Instagram page you want to start the podcast, write the article, like write the book. I mean, there's so much room for all of us. And it's amazing to see when these new accounts pop up every day, or someone will message me and be like, I started my sober account. And I'm like, yay. Like, sorry. New York City living. It's like 1,000,000 degrees here right now. So I think the animals are starting to go crazy too.
Mm-hmm. Summer's hard.
Summer in the city is no joke.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I need to escape. Maybe a trip to Bali's in my future.
Bali, yes. All right. I have one more question for you, which is if you had any advice or wisdom to someone who is starting off their sober journey and doesn't really know like where to start or what to do, what would your advice be?
You need to find replacements for everything in your life, because if you keep doing the same things that you were doing when you were drinking, it's going to lead you back to the booze. You need to change up your friends. Who in your life where are places you can make new friends? And you need to replace like what you're drinking, obviously, but like find fun beverages, whether it's like a seltzer you love or a non-alcoholic beverage, like whatever it is, find something, stock your fridge with it. And every time you want to drink, like I did with my tea, go and get one of those beverages. And you need to find something to replace your extra time that you're going to have in your life. When you stop drinking, you find yourself with all of this free time, whether it's at night or in the morning, and you need to put activities in place for yourself. So you have something to do, whether it's like adult coloring or writing or journaling or walking. Make a plan for yourself and stick to that plan. And after like 30 days, reevaluate where you're at. So that's my biggest advice.
Love it. Love it. Rachel, this was amazing. This was so cool to finally meet you, to sit down with you, to hear a bit about more about your story and how you got to what you're doing today. And I just think your work is just so inspiring and going to have such a ripple impact on not just New York, but also, the rest of the sober city movement. So it was really amazing to chat with you. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks so much for having me. This was amazing to come on, and I can't wait to come to Bali one day. So,
Yes, we will meet in real life for sure. All right. Take care.
bye.